Gentlemen, welcome to the CNBC TV 18 special panel discussion. Destination Madhya Pradesh, could it be the next big IT state in the country? The gentlemen on the panel need no introduction. Mr. Anurag Jain is the Secretary to the Chief Minister and Secretary IT. That should give you some idea of how important IT is in the Madhya Pradesh setup, sharing portfolios. Mr. Nakul Subramaniam, who's VP for FirstSource, the largest BPO listed in India. He handles infrastructure and facilities there. We've got Mr. Lalit Sahni, formerly of Reliance, now CEO of Creative IT, also a former head of CSI. We've got Mr. Avni Vaish, who is Principal Secretary Industries for Madhya Pradesh. We've also got with us Mr. Rakesh Sahni, who is Chief Secretary Madhya Pradesh. Thanks so much for joining us, sir. Mr. Kiran Karnik, President NASSCOM. And joining us, of course, also Mr. Praveen Kankaria of Impetus. He's the CEO of the Indore-based company. Mr. Sahni, the sense is that Madhya Pradesh does have great potential, as the Minister very wittily put it. But something in the middle, your summary of the day's events, what's the slip between the cup and the lip?
Madhya Pradesh is a very exciting prospect. And today the exercise was primarily to present ourselves to the IT world, tell the IT industry what Madhya Pradesh is all about. Obviously, nothing is going to happen in a hurry, but we are certain that given our advantages, you cannot afford to ignore us any longer.
Mr. Vaish, there's this whole myth about new economy and old economy, but most of the time it is states which have great industrial practices in the first place, which tend to be IT superpowers because domain skills come around the existing industry. Indore's got great industrial legacy. You've got a great legacy of auto, and we've seen how Pune has come up as an IT auto destination because of existing domain skills. Is it also incumbent on existing industry in Madhya Pradesh to help leverage IT?
Oh, certainly, and I think they are beginning to do that. I mean, as you said, Madhya Pradesh has missed the bus on several waves. This is a bus we certainly don't want to miss. The IT policy is in place, and as a backdrop to that, the industrial policy of 2004. What I'd like to say about that policy is that while concessions and SOPs and so on are something that most states offer, what we try to do in Madhya Pradesh is sort out more the institutional side of it so that things roll more smoothly as far as the industry-government interaction is concerned. So single window clearances, project clearance implementation board, which is chaired by the Chief Secretary, Apex committee, which the Chief Minister himself chairs. So I think the emphasis now is towards sorting out the institutional glitches.
Mr. Jain, there's no point, sometimes dreaming too big. It's always great to dream, but it's unlikely that a city in Madhya Pradesh or the state is going to very soon catch up with, say, a Bangalore or a Hyderabad. But today, with those cities losing their competitiveness, lots of companies are looking at the next tier. So a Jaipur is coming up, a Calcutta is coming up, maybe even a Cochin. Very clear chance there for a Bhopal and Indore to emerge as a second-tier destination almost immediately.
That is what we are working at. The kind of benefits we are offering, our IT policy is the most lucrative of all. One account is that we give 100% tax exemption on registration. Our land concessions are much more beneficial. So this way, if you have a look at this, our IT policy is the most beneficial to the incumbent industry. Then we are already coming up with infrastructural support. We have already floated tenders for RFQs for our IT SEZs, and our IT SEZ Bhopal, which is proposed, is just about 3 minutes away from the airport. It's 180-acre infrastructure which is coming up. This kind of infrastructure you will not find in tier 1 cities. So whenever an industry should think of tier 2 city, Bhopal and Indore should naturally come to their mind, and that is what we want to project it to the world, right?
As a Bombayite, I can't even pretend to understand what you're saying, because the only thing 3 minutes away from the Bombay airport is the gate of the Bombay airport. Mr. Subramaniam, as you would know, you've been here. Let's get some serious feedback from somebody who set up in Indore. FirstSource is there in Bangalore, they're there in Bombay. You've got a good idea of relative strengths and weaknesses. How's the experience in MP been so far?
Well, the experience in MP is pretty positive. I think there are 3 things this industry needs. One is obviously the human resource, second is the social infrastructure, and the third is the physical infrastructure. And I think in MP the first 2, at least in Indore, are pretty much in place already. And it's just the physical infrastructure which I'm sure will catch up.
Mr. Sahni, many years ago when Reliance decided to set up in Kopar Khairani in Mumbai, people thought that, where are they setting up? It's got nothing going for it, but as long as you get your operations in place, you've got good people coming there, the whole setup seems to be working. A lot of things may be working against MP, but you definitely see some hope in the way the new policy is being constructed?
Absolutely. I think the policy is in place, the incentives are in place, and more than just the incentives in the policy, I think there's also a focus on applications. For example, there is a specific focus on promoting e-governance. Now, if e-governance comes, along with e-governance, people who supply networks, people who supply software will also come. So I think that focus also needs to be given much more prominence. But as happened in Kopar Khairane, I think there is a need for providing a critical mass. And it may be that if we can provide a little bit of excitement in terms of a focus for a few activities. For example, if State Bank of India can manage its IT from Vashi, can we motivate them to manage their IT from Indore, remote infrastructure management based out of Indore? So if we can provide some bit of excitement that the state will focus on two new areas, whether it is retail infrastructure management, whether it is software testing, and if we can provide a critical mass to those activities and then provide some excitement saying that this is the destination for software testing, maybe then there'll be critical mass, a lot more people will come.
That's an interesting point. Mr. Karnik, critical mass usually means a leap of faith. Somebody has got to come in and invest in a big way and take that risk. We've seen it happen. You talked about Kolkata when Wipro came there, no Indian IT major had set up in a big way. They took a leap of faith, and we've seen how good that's been for Kolkata. Do you think something like that possible in Madhya Pradesh?
You know, I think it's entirely possible. First, because the enabling conditions are there. More needs to be done. I want to emphasize that, but I think a lot of things are there. And to take that leap of faith, there has to be a peg on which you hang something that gets somebody. It can be a variety of things. For example, in Indore, one of the major companies came because the person who made the decision was an alumnus from Indore. I think one has got to find those connections, leverage them. It won't happen just because the person is from there. But if there are other conditions that make it conducive, it can happen. And I do think very genuinely that Madhya Pradesh now is well positioned to do that. The question is how quickly and how big do we do it, because the industry is looking for new places.
One, of course, is big industry. You have the first sources, the Genpacts coming, but it's also very critical, as we saw in the Silicon Valley culture, for startups, for new companies, for small guys to set up. What was the decision that drove being in Indore?
I had access to a small office in my father's house, so it was a no-brainer for me.
Do you stand by that decision now?
I stand by the decision because along the way, our brain trust in the company is organically developed. So the core team of the company are all fresh recruits who I hired in the early 90s and who stuck with me and developed into superb executives and superb architects. The challenge we are facing that because of this brain trust, we grew very rapidly, and now we are having to go outside the state for taking care of our growth.
I just want to turn on Paul's point here. I think it's important to look at how Praveen grew, and he was from there. But one of the things that a state that is aspiring and wants to do can do to kickstart the process is to provide an impetus to local entrepreneurs.
The University of Technology of Madhya Pradesh, RGTU, is preparing quality manpower for the industry at home and abroad. Madhya Pradesh has vast talent pool of highly enthusiastic, energetic and creative minds of our younger community of students. Tremendous amount of interest in IT is visible in our colleges of engineering in Madhya Pradesh. We have around 90 colleges which are affiliated to University of Technology.